When planting or starting a new church, there are a few questions that you will get often that you want to make sure you have an answer to. And so today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to share with you 6 questions you will get when you're a new church.
Well, thanks for joining us again today on Practical Church Planting. My name is Brian Androsian, and with me is Dylan Dodson. And today we're going to give you 6 questions that you get when you're a new church.
So these are things heard a lot pre-launch, maybe the first year or two.
Mm-hmm.
And next episode, one after this, we're going to do questions you get when you're an established church.
When you're an old
They
church.
change.
Yep.
The point of this is maybe to bring some of them to your attention, maybe to encourage you that it's like, oh, I've heard this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But also maybe to think through, to be prepared to answer these questions. And we'll talk through, maybe what you should say or shouldn't say or whatever. But it's just helpful when people ask questions to have something to say.
Yeah.
And so
I think, you're never going to have an answer to, or a perfect answer to every single question, but if it's common questions, it's best not to be like fumbling or unexpected, even if you don't have the greatest answer in the world, but at least to seem like you've thought about it before.
You will undoubtedly hear all of these at some point. And if you're new with us, if you're on Facebook, make sure you join the Practical Church Planting Facebook group.
Yep.
People join all the time. You can ask questions, and that's a good time in there. So make sure you check that out as well. So here we go. 6 questions you'll get when you're a new church. Number 1, why you chose the name of your church. Now, again, these are questions that were asked a lot in the beginning that aren't asked as much now.
Yeah.
And I hardly ever get anybody ask me why we call it New City Church.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, people ask all the time.
I think it's a common, like, early on question.
It's just kind of funny. Like, I know there's obviously some psychological reasoning because why people did it now. Like, I get it, like, during the pre-launch phase, but even for the first year or two, people would ask.
Oh, really?
But now we're 5.5 years in,
Yeah.
and now people don't. I mean, I guess if they're like interested, they might. But it's not like in the beginning it was like, tell me why of the name of the the reasoning's not the same. If that makes sense, it's got a lot more, but for whatever reason, it's stopped.
Yeah.
The longer you got, and so our name was New City Church. We talked our very first episode.
Yeah.
Number 1,
Way
we
back.
talked about.
Yep. How to name your church.
Yeah, what things to think through. Sometimes I feel like we should redo some of these eepisodes, but then I look at them and like I would say the same thing.
Yeah.
But then I also know that people aren't going back probably
Yeah.
to the beginning of this. Anyway, episode number 1, what you should name your church. It's our approach it was very unspiritual.
Yeah.
And so Christine, my wife, would also sometimes get mad at me when people would ask, and she was right. She's like, you also need to like give some vision behind it, because like for us, we wanted a church that wasn't super well known. I mean, we weren't going for like unique, but just like if somebody were to look up this church, it's not like a really well-known church in the United States nationally, because it'd be harder to find. If you Googled it, you'd find that church.
Yeah.
And then we try to find, also part of the criteria was a really large or well-known church, even within North Carolina, so that people wouldn't get confused if ever they looked us up online, because that's where everything is now.
Yep.
We tried to find one that we could have a URL and social media all the same. Which, again, people might say that seems very superficial, but if our goal is to reach people for Jesus, then the name of your church, like, I don't know, I guess people have opinions. To me, I'm like, it doesn't, I don't really care what it is.
Yeah.
And so we want to have something consistent so people could find us really easily and not be confused. And then, of course, it talks about, Jesus talks about creating a new city, or in Revelation, 21? I forget what the verse is. No, I forget. In Matthew 15.
Yeah.
Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. And then Revelation, I think it's 21, talks about it, the New Jerusalem. And so sometimes I like throw in there, like, we want to be a part of people experiencing the city to come.
Yeah.
These, whatever. I'd probably say a little better than that. I should have always been more prepared to answer that way. But also, like, we just liked it, and it was available. And so, anyway, I'm not saying that was the best approach. I would say, though, whatever your reasoning is, like, just say it.
Yeah.
Like, we like this name. We thought it fit the community. It was easy to find online, or if you have like a verse or a passage of scripture that was motivation behind it, well, then this is obviously really easy because you can explain some of your vision. So I probably should have taken more advantage of it, as Christina would often tell me, to like not just say, well, it was available and we liked it, but also like talk about those verses about the new city, whatever. But it's also because we liked it. So anyway, you're going to get that a lot in the beginning. So just have something to say.
And it's, just be honest about why. I mean, I don't think there's like necessarily a good I don't think there's a bad reason to pick a name, really. Maybe there is. But if you picked it for a reason and you felt that it was the right choice, so just tell people whatever the reason is. Even if it's like just a geographical reason, like there's some churches that have geographical names, that's fine. Like it's named after our city or whatever. I mean, if it's named after a city, people probably won't ask why. But whatever it is, just tell people why. And I don't know. I don't think you need to make a bigger thing about it than it is. Just be honest about it, and whatever the reason you chose it, tell people that's the reason.
Yeah, just have an answer. Don't be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And also try to like get it under 2 minutes.
Yeah,
I mean, if people want to talk more, they can. But get that a lot in the beginning, not as much later on.
Yep.
Some of it makes sense to me. Some of it I'm like, I don't understand. Because like if you're new, like I just thought like if you're a new, like say you came to a new city a year in,
Hmm.
you're new and you would ask that question, but people come now and we're like 5.5 years in, it's like nobody asks.
Yeah,
We're
that
like,
is weird.
How come new people in the beginning wanted to know? And
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Just get it less.
Yep.
So, why you chose the name of your church? Get that a lot. Number 2, the lead pastor's education.
Hmm.
Now, people have different opinions on this. Seminary, not whatever. Whatever. Doesn't whatever. People just will ask this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you need to therefore go to seminary or go to wherever just to have an answer, but like people ask, and fortunately for me, I had an undergrad degree in religion and a master's degree in religion. So like people that I don't know thought that it was necessary or
Cared
whatever,
more. Yeah.
like it was helpful.
Yeah.
And whereas if I didn't, it would be not helpful. Not necessarily saying like I couldn't be a pastor, but like in those conversations, I like to think of it this way: people just are where they are, and so whether or not you like some of these questions that people ask you or things that they do, like anything you can do to reach people, you just meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And so I was annoyed when the question was not out of just interest, but also like, are you legit? And I was like, okay, but I also get it.
Yeah.
And so I just so you know that this happens, and whatever your education level is, I wouldn't necessarily apologize for it if it's not what you would want it to be, or if you're embarrassed by it. I don't know, but just know that's going to be asked. And so I think with some of these questions too, we'll talk about more. It's not you don't. I think the challenge is, especially if you're younger and if you're a newer church, to have like these really sophisticated, strong answers for every question. I don't think that's necessary. I think you just should have an answer, and it's okay if your answer isn't what you would want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the one next week, we'll talk about doing stuff in the community, like community outreach, community service. What we do as a church now is not what my ideal would be.
Yeah.
But I just say, here's why, here's what we do now, here's what we wanted to be, and like it is what it is, and not really apologizing for it because you can only do what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So with the education thing, just say what it is. You'll get it a lot in the beginning for whatever reason. Again, hardly anyone ever asks me now.
Yeah.
I think I get it now because we've been around for a while. It looks like we somewhat know what we're doing. So people kind of see the church and its establishedness of it as credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Where in the beginning, it's like, who are you? What is this thing? And so people are trying to figure out, is this legit at all?
Yeah.
And so you just get asked about it. So just prepare to answer.
And I think some people also ask just because it's a normal thing to ask sometimes. Like I've asked. I don't remember if I ever asked it to you or it just came up early on because I've known your background for a while. But I've asked this of previous church plants I was with. And it wasn't because like I was weighing on whether or not they were good enough or whatever. But it was just like, I don't know. It's just kind of like getting to know you kind of thing. Like regardless of the answer, it wasn't like bearing on if I was going to go. Now, some people obviously have other reasons to ask, but I think, like Dylan said, don't apologize for it. But also I think it's helpful to, how do I put this? I remember asking previously a guy who didn't go to seminary, and he said he didn't, which was fine, but then gave kind of a lot of reasons why not, almost as if, and I don't think this was his intention, but almost came across as if this is why I was right to do this and seminary is wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think he really thought that, but that's kind of the way it came across. And if I didn't know him very well, then it could have seemed very much like, oh, I chose not to because, I have a better way of doing it than kind of the traditional way of doing it. And I remember, and that still stuck out to me like years later because it seemed a little cocky, like just to come across that way. Now, I didn't go to seminary. Like, I don't have a problem with someone not going, but the reason behind it, I think can, or the defense of it that you give, I think can kind of rub people the wrong way a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful if you didn't go to seminary to maybe talk a little. I mean, it kind of depends on like where the relationship is with the person. Like if this is your first time meeting, maybe you don't need to go into this big long spiel, but I think it can be helpful to talk about a little bit about what you maybe are doing, because one thing I think it can come across as if like, I didn't go to seminary, but I'm potentially, in my 20s planting a church, and it can come across like I know it all and have no need for it. So you can talk about other things that you may be doing. Like we've talked about in the past, there's a lot of education things that are out there that you can do. But granted, that's not, the first time you meet somebody, you don't need to go into this whole thing. But as you're kind of developing that relationship, I think it's helpful for people to know what you're doing, that you're not just like sitting back and saying, I know it all at this point, even though I'm only 25 years old or whatever. But they're continually learning, but also not coming across as if, the path I chose is the best path, and anyone
Yep.
who decided to go a different route is lesser than.
Yeah, I think the problem is that the tension is when somebody asks you this question and you feel like your answer is not going to be satisfactory to them.
Yeah.
You can go that route, or you can come like just trying to maybe defend yourself, or excuses is not the right word, but you feel bad, and so you say, "Well, I haven't gone to seminary or I haven't done this, but like I'm still really It just can come across as weird. So I would
Yeah.
just say, whatever your answer is, just say it, and
Yeah.
if they want to learn more, that's great, but don't feel bad if it's not what you think they want to hear, because it just is what it is. So
Yeah.
it can be. I've just learned it can be helpful. And I'm not saying go to seminary just so you can answer this question at the beginning of your church plant. It can be helpful. If not, a lot of people don't care. So I just want to encourage you that way. But those that do, it's okay if it's not. And at the end of the day, too, for us, it's about continuing to grow. And so while it's nice to have the credential, maybe like I know way more now than I did 7 years ago, and I
Sure.
haven't increased my credentialed education.
Right.
So I think the challenge is whether you've been to seminary or not, and this might not satisfy the person answering the question, but it's just good personally, is to make sure you're doing things to develop your growth, theologically and intellectually, and learning more about the scriptures or whatever.
Yeah.
That you're not just like, oh, I'll just do sermon prep. Like you've got to be doing intentional stuff to learn and grow as well. So
And there's always going to be things that turn certain people off.
Yep.
So like you said, like education's good, but it shouldn't just be so you can get more people to be bought in. There's going to be people who we're non-denominational who are turned off by that,
Yep.
and who are turned off by age, for whatever reason. And so education is great, but don't make the reason that you're doing it just so that you can have something to put up on the wall, so that if anybody asks, you feel like you're good enough.
yeah. So whatever it is, just answer it. Don't feel bad if it's not what you think they want. It is what it is.
Yep.
But you will be asked, so be prepared. Number 3, speaking of what Brian just talked about, who is your church associated with? So you'll get this a lot. No, we still get this sometimes, but again, not as much as we did in the beginning. I think maybe just because it seems more legit or credible since it's been around for a while,
Yeah.
that people are less concerned. I don't know. But you get this a lot. And of course, we say this often on this podcast, that you shouldn't plant by yourself. So whether that's a denomination, a network, something, I think if you don't have an answer, unlike this education one, which is like if you don't have the appropriate answer, it's like whatever, or could be. I think this one is like, yeah, it would be hard for me, not hard for me. I would not join a church plant if the plant was just planting alone.
Right.
I would. Now there might be some extenuating circumstances, whatever. I get that. Just as a general rule, especially not knowing what I know now, absolutely wouldn't do it. And also, like our church wouldn't fund any church that was doing it, even if it's someone I really, really like. It's just not wise. And so people are going to ask, but we also think you should have an answer, because if you're doing it by yourself, it's probably not going to go well. So,
Yep.
What's your church associated with?
Yeah, I feel like we get this question more now from like people who are in church world, like other, whether pastors or church planners, whatever. But yeah, I don't really hear this as much anymore. But there's, if your answer is nobody, then like that's a problem. And also, you need to I would have a pretty strong reason why the answer is nobody, and the reasons may not be great. Like there's reasons not to be associated with like certain, you might say like this is a common denomination in my area and this is why I'm not associated with them. But to be associated with nobody, I think is, I don't know. I don't want to say everyone's wrong doing that, but that would be a tough one to get on board with, like Dylan was saying. But who you're associated with, and whether that's a denomination, whether that's a network, I think if it's a network, it might take a little bit more explaining of what that is to a non-church plant person. We're Acts 29. Most regular people probably don't know what Acts 29 is, but we're not part of a denomination. And so just being able to tell someone what you're a part of and what that actually means without, in like a 10-second thing, not like in a big spiel, but just this is what it is. This is what they are. They help plant churches and we're a part of them. That kind of thing. I think will help answer a lot of people's questions about that.
Yeah, I found a lot of this was not so much that they cared who you were associated with, as long as you're associated with somebody. Because the average person has no idea what Acts 29 is, or any network.
Right.
And of course, denominations now aren't what they were before, where people would like move into town and look for a certain denominational church.
Right.
Because even you could have a Presbyterian or Baptist or Methodist, but even that, the practice could be so different that even finding that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same somewhere else. So just know people are going to ask. And again, whether you think they're going to like your answer or not, it's just give them an answer. Give them a quick spiel. Again, most people don't know what Acts 29 is. So we would say, hey, we're non-denominational, but we're part of Acts 29. It's a global church family. We get accountability, relationships, all that sort of thing. But the point is, we're not doing this by ourselves. And most people never actually look up the Acts 29 website or anything like that. They just know we're not by ourselves. And so you'll get asked that question. Again, assume that people don't really know who you're talking about. So say, hey, this is who they are. Also, what I found is most people don't really want like a big description.
Oh
They're
yeah.
just kind of curious. Now,
Yeah.
some people do, and that's totally fine. Particularly in the very beginning, even pre-launch phase, they want to know these things. You want to talk through them, but just again, don't try to be all things, all people, if you will. If you know you're a part of a network or denomination, and you're like, this person's probably not gonna like that, like
Mhm.
just tell them anyway and let
Yep.
them decide. But don't be on any of these things. If you're kind of like mushy or unsure, it just comes across as weird, especially because you're going to get these a lot. And so, who's your church associated with is a question you'll get often.
Yeah, and I think I don't know this one, the education question, a number of these. I mean, you'll probably get them regardless of whatever age you're planting, but especially if you're younger, I think people just want to know that like, hey, you're not doing this alone, or you're not just kind of winging it. Because a lot of people, including us, people in our 20s are stupid, like and make a lot of mistakes, and so they want to make sure like you're not just going out on your own trying to do this thing, and I'm hitching my wagon to you, and you're just trying to do your own thing. But people want to know that you have a little bit of backing or a little bit of accountability. And so none of these questions are like uh, mean spirited or
Yeah.
trying to undermine you or anything. It's like, I'm genuinely curious. Do you have someone making sure you're doing the right things and you're accountable to somebody? And so just having some answers to these honest answers are, I think it's going to be really helpful to a lot of people.
Yep. So, who's your church associated with? You'll get that a lot.
Yep.
Number 4, what is the vision for your church, or what the vision for your church is?
Mhm.
People ask that a lot. People don't ask that as much. Again, I think people just, I don't know. They don't ask it as much now.
Yep.
I mean, some people do sometimes, particularly like if our Discover membership lunch thing, but like generally speaking, people aren't really asking much about it. So I don't have an answer. Our mission at New City is to help people meet Jesus and grow in a relationship with Him. So we've done various things because there's actually like a difference between a vision statement and a mission statement. And I think all this stuff is fine. I found that people aren't going to remember all these things anyway.
Yep.
And so we just stick with our mission statement, which is to help people meet Jesus and grow a relationship with Him. Most of our people probably couldn't necessarily recite that, but they would be very familiar if they heard it. They'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And it's a quick phrase. Here's why we exist. And so, whatever it is, love God, love people, serve the world. That's like a common one, or
Mhm.
whatever it is for you. I would pick something that you want it to be, but also, and I think we've talked about, I don't know what number, we've talked about this in episodes
Yeah.
somewhere.
Probably ways back.
I would also encourage you to consider this could change, but like, what do you say easily? Not like what do you think is the right answer, but whatever you repeat often is what you're going to say often, is what other people are going to like follow or hear a lot, or also then repeat themselves. So obviously what you want your say to be, what you say your vision is, your mission is to be right and accurate and what you want, but also like phrasing it in a way that people will actually say it. Because if it's just on the wall somewhere or in your document somewhere that no one ever says and knows, and it's not actually what it is. So people ask what your vision is. Again, this is also where you can feel the pressure to do this like really long, inspiring, and there are certainly times for that, but oftentimes people are just curious about these things. They want to know. And so having just an elevator pitch answer for all these things is really helpful, particularly for this. What is the vision of your church? And to kind of explain whatever your vision or mission statement is, and maybe a few minutes of why. That is what I found to be the best thing, but you'll get that question a lot.
Yeah, like you said, vision and mission statement are technically different things. Like, to boil it down, mission statement is what you're doing, and vision is like if you accomplish your mission, this is the vision. But
Yep.
we spent a while trying to develop like the perfect, because we have mission statement was, I think, before we even launched, like that's been
Yep.
set in stone forever. But trying to like come up with the perfect vision statement and things, but it just boiled down to people are really going to remember one thing,
Yep.
and this is what we wanted to remember. Of course, we want, if we accomplish this, I mean, you never really accomplish that because there's an unending amount of people in the world. But we want people to meet Jesus and grow in a relationship with Him. We don't have like an X number of people that we have to hit and then we are done. And so like I think after a while we just kind of said like we're sticking with the mission statement. If someone asks what the vision statement is, they probably have no idea what the difference is unless they're like immersed in the nonprofit world. Nobody else cares. But we just tell them this is what our mission statement is. And I don't know about you. I've never had anyone be like, no, I said vision. Like,
Yes.
no, what's the vision statement? Because nobody cares. Like people care, but they don't care. It's not like they're indifferent, but they're kind of indifferent. Like people just want to know that what the mission of the church is. And in reality, most people, if they've been to a church in church, like more than a couple years, they know the idea. Like every church has a similar mission or similar mission statement. It's just phrased differently. Everyone wants people to meet Jesus and to love people and to love Jesus. And so in reality, I think most people aren't like, this isn't a qualifying thing of if I'm on board of your church. It's just, what are you going to be saying a lot? I mean, that's probably not what they're thinking, but that's kind of the idea. It's just, what are we talking about here? And most people are going to accept that perfectly fine. So if you have like a boiled down mission or a vision statement that you're really passionate about and you're going to be repeating, then cool.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't apologize for the fact that if you just want to focus on your mission statement, someone asks you about vision, just talk to them about mission, and it's very similar.
Yeah, if you're like, I didn't know there was a difference. So in the business world, a vision is if your mission is accomplished. So like a company that's trying to fight world hunger would say their vision would be like there would be no more world hunger.
Right.
They probably say better than that. Or someone who's trying to fight homelessness, like no more. There'd be no more homeless people in this city.
Yeah.
If they're if their mission was accomplished. So like a vision for a church could be like it's something that would never happen, but it's just like the goal.
Yeah.
So like all people in our community involved in a local church or something. I mean, I don't even know what ours was.
Yeah.
But it's something like a mission is what you're trying to do, and a vision is if your mission is accomplished. So we want to help you meet Jesus, grow a relationship with Him. If that were to happen, there'd be tons of church plants and whatever.
Right.
So again, people, they just want to know what you're about. And so make sure you have an answer that you actually repeat and say often. And if you have a vision or a mission statement that's like theologically great and articulate and all these things, and it's 5 sentences long, and you don't even know what it is without looking. That's not a good one. It's got to be brief, so that people can really understand what's happening. So,
and to when did this come up? It came up at some point. We asked, so maybe it was in a trivia thing or something like that, or a Instagram thing we posted. I can't remember, but I remember a while back asking people what our mission statement was, and
I do not.
I can't remember what it was for, but we got a few people saying like. Or maybe it was just like in conversation. I can't remember, but basically, some people knew it. Obviously,
I don't remember any time.
Well, the reason it stuck out to me is because someone I remember who said that it was what is the Bible Project's thing? It's that Scripture is a unified story that leads to Jesus. Because in the series we were repeating that a lot. I forget what we were preaching to at the time, but that was getting repeated a lot. And so the moral of the story is people will remember what you repeat a lot. So if it's a mission statement that you're just never going to say, or vision statement,
Right.
whatever, then it's kind of pointless. Like I get the point is like every action you do should unify behind it. But if people aren't going to remember it because you're not actually saying it, then there's not really a reason to say that this is it because you're obviously not repeating it. But like here it's repeated often. It's worked into sermons as much as possible. Like not shoehorned in, but it just comes up a lot.
Yep.
It's on our wall. It's in everything we do. And so like it's very common for people to know, but whatever you repeat a lot is what people are going to remember. So you can say this is our mission statement or this is our vision. But if you're saying something completely different, that's what they're going to remember. They're not going to remember that you told them this is what it is.
There's 3 phrases we say often at New City that I think people could say. People could probably say would be any one of these 3. We try to say our mission statement the most, helping meet Jesus, grow a relationship with Him. We also say often that the Bible's a unified story that leads to Jesus, because we primarily preach through books of the Bible, and so it's very often be able to, they're referencing, like we've been in Mark for a while, so there's a lot of Old Testament references. And then we say, if because of Jesus you have nothing to prove and no one to impress.
That's right.
And so we say that a lot as well. So those are the 3 that we say.
That's
often.
right. So. But people remember what you repeat, and so I'm cool. Like if someone remembers that you have nothing to prove and nothing to prove and no one to impress, and they don't remember our mission statement, I'm cool with that because that's something good for them to remember. But if you're just completely ignoring your mission statement, then it's gonna be tough for people to remember it.
Yep. So, what is the vision of your church, or some associated question like that? You'll get it a lot. Make sure you have an answer. Yep. Number 5, what type of church are you? And that's you'll get that a lot.
That however you
Sometimes
want.
it's like they could be talking like denominationally, they could be talking theologically, they could be talking worship preference, spiritual gifts. A lot of times the people will ask that, and I don't think they always understand that. Where do you want me to go?
Yeah.
But you'll get that a lot. And so I would just say have questions for these things. And again, you don't need to try to convince anybody of anything. Just say who you are. That's who you are. And if they may like that or they may not like that.
Yeah.
People will definitely at least respect that you have an answer, not just like, well, I don't know. It depends on, like, what does your church do? And if your church does something that you don't, maybe you want your church to do something that it's not doing, but if it's not currently doing it, then, if you say one thing and they show up and it's like, that wasn't like this. Yeah. So you might ask, like, what do you mean by that? But people will ask, and that's what they often talk about. They want to talk about worship style or demographics, like age or ethnicity, depending on where you live. But you'll get this question of like, what kind of church are you? And just have answers to be able to talk through these sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just asking them what they're referring to. Yep. Like, I think you can kind of tell if this is like a heavy church-going person or not. That you can kind of base your answer on where that's headed. But I've been asked this question. It was even asked like relatively recently, and it's still. I've asked been asked a number of times, and it still catches me off guard just a little bit. I mean, now I kind of know to expect it, but it is because it is kind of like a. What do you want to know? Like, just ask the question you actually want to ask. If you want to know like what the worship style is, then just ask that. But like people don't always know how to phrase their questions, and so just asking what kind of church is it is an easy way to ask, and it's kind of an all encompassing thing. But for that one, I would be comfortable, or I would encourage you to be comfortable with asking some qualifying questions
Yep.
before just like, what kind of church are you? We're Baptist, or we're whatever, and they might be like, I don't have any experience with that, so I'm not sure what
Yep.
that means, but that's not really what I was asking. So kind of digging a little bit deeper in that question, I think is helpful.
Yeah, this question's hard too because even if they're thinking like denominationally, again, because they're so different nowadays, like a Baptist church,
Oh yeah,
that doesn't like it give me a whole wide of things or whatever. And so,
Yep.
like we're not a denominational part of a network. People often mean like, are you like an old church or a young church? And they mean people, and it's like, well, I mean, we got variety,
a little of both. Yeah.
a variety church, but just however you get that phrase, if you start hearing this question more and more, just make sure you have a nice, succinct answer. Again, the point for all this, we keep saying this, but like, don't feel like you have to convince anybody of anything. Just have an answer, because having an answer means you've thought through it, and that's like, oh, okay, they've actually thought of this.
Yeah.
If people have what they think is a really basic question and you don't have an answer, they're going to be like, well, that was weird. Like, why haven't they thought of this?
Yeah.
And maybe somebody gives you a question that you've never thought of, and so maybe that's why. But some of these are going to get a lot. What type of church are you? I think again, the challenge here is not trying to become overly impressive or trying to answer what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Just answer what you think the answer is, and let them do with it as they wish.
Yep. That's exactly right.
So, what type of church are you? And then, last but not least, number 6. This is not really a question. It's just kind of an assumption. And we'll talk about the flip side of this on the next episode. But assuming there isn't much for you to do, now I would say this: the average person isn't thinking, I wonder what my pastor's doing all week. Like they're not like thinking like I need a timesheet or whatever. I think sometimes we can maybe get self-conscious on ourselves. Like we got to make sure we're doing all these things so that, but like people aren't necessarily thinking about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, sometimes you'll get things like, I remember getting a call one time and someone was like, hey, it was like a Thursday or something. They want to talk about something. They're like, well, I guess you've got the sermon done. So can we meet today? And like the assumption was, well, you just like write a sermon and that's all you do. And so once you got done.
Yeah.
And my challenge here though, is to be okay with whatever people think. I mean, one of my soapboxes, if you listen to this, is the word busy, and how I don't think that's helpful, and how I tell people I'm not busy. And this is almost once a week. Last Sunday, I was talking to someone. They came up to me, and like, I know you're really busy because I have this like prayer box outside my office. People can drop them in. She's like, I wrote this down, but most people were gone. She's like, I want to talk to you a second. I was like, well, I'm not busy. I'm not busy, and you have to be okay with people maybe thinking that you don't work hard. I don't know. I would rather people think I don't work hard and get this like busy, I don't have time for you out of the vocabulary, because I want also people to know that they shouldn't be busy either. Mm-hmm. I personally know that I work hard, so I'm not necessarily self-conscious about it, because it's like I know that's not true of me, but they might assume that. And so I don't know. The tension here in the beginning is you don't want people thinking you're lazy, but also like you want people to know that you have time for them. And so I would just encourage, even in the beginning, even if you get some of these comments or jokes of like, do you do anything but work on Sundays? Christina, my wife, actually really hates this because I joke about this often, how I don't do anything but work on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And she's like, stop. I'm like, well, whatever. But maybe don't do that. You don't have to do that. But like, just tell people, hey, I'm not busy. And you might be busy. You might have a lot of things going on that week, but you got to be a little bit flexible. We've got a lot of episodes on efficiency and productivity. There's ways to help balance that out. But you might get that assumption, and your initial defense might be like, let me explain to them all these things that I'm doing. And maybe there's times for that. I don't know if someone's like really into it. But also, I think it's okay for people to not feel like busyness is a goal in and of itself. But you might run into that a little bit in the beginning.
Honestly, I mean, you can tell me if you disagree. I don't think many people outside. I mean, I'm sure there's some situations, but for the vast majority of people, unless you're like making it very clear that you don't work, like if you're a big social media person, you're always posting things that you're doing during the day, and it's never work things, like that kind of thing. Unless it seems very clear that you're not actually working, I don't think most people. This might sound bad. I don't think most people think about you, me, us enough to think that we don't, that we're not working enough, like I think sometimes that's our own, I don't know, insecurity, assumption, whatever about ourselves, that people assume that they think this of us, which some people may, and some people may really, like you said, some people may really care that you're just doing a lot of things, but those people may just be hard people to please regardless. Yeah. But for the vast majority of people, I don't think people think enough about us to to think that you're lazy unless you're like
Yeah.
really showing it. Or like if there's been multiple instances of you kind of being flaky or letting people down, that kind of thing. If you kind of build that reputation up, that's a little tough. But if you're just doing your thing, and I don't think most people are gonna like. I don't think most people are gonna assume that you're not doing anything unless you're giving them a reason to assume it. And so I don't think you have to always give a, you know, a big long spiel about all the stuff you're doing. If someone says you're so busy, just say I'm not too busy to talk to you, or I'm not
Yeah.
too busy for whatever.
Or just
And
say literally, I'm not busy.
or I'm not busy.
Try
and, and like if someone's wanting to meet with you, you there might be times that you are too busy, like work related things, but most church things can be moved around.
Yeah.
Like, you know, obviously there's some specific things that you maybe not be able to, but you can, I mean, we've talked about this a million times, but you can structure your calendar in a way that you can shift something around if there's an emergency. And so it's very rare that someone like will talk to any of us and be like, I can't do it. You know, I can't talk to you for an extended period of time without telling them this is a time when I can meet. And so I don't think unless you're really giving someone a specific reason to think that you're lazy, I don't think most people are going to, even if you don't tell them what you do every day of the week.
Yeah, we've got episodes on what I found is like sometimes we feel really busy and stressed out because we haven't proactively managed our time.
Yeah.
So we have episodes on productivity. I don't know what the numbers are. I
There-
do know.
there's a
I mean,
number
this
of
is
them.
on a side note. So on my website, dylandotson.com, I do a weekly newsletter. But if you, I mean, you can unsubscribe for it if you want to. But if you sign up with your email address, I have like this PDF of like 10 ways 10 hours to reduce 10 hours of your work week or something like that.
Yeah.
Which like very practical things that you can do so that you're efficient with your time so that you can make space for all these other things. So that's on my personal one. But I also this really stuck out to me too, because people are wired differently and there's strengths and weaknesses to both. But I'm someone who feels like I have to be doing something all the time. And so sometimes I would feel guilty like I'm not doing enough. No one has ever accused me of not doing enough, but it's like people give to the church. I feel like and it really stuck out to me during COVID and like the last couple of years of how maybe lazy's not the right word. Unbusy people actually are. A lot of people are at their own jobs. Like Christina, for example, she works part-time, helps run this marriage ministry. She works like 15, 18 hours a week. And she's like, I do as much work as a lot of these 40-hour week people. Because like we'll talk to people and it's like, I spent the day on my phone. Like people aren't, my experience, a lot of people aren't like actually go getting it themselves. But again, a lot of us are bad with our time. We check social media, we check email all the time. And so we feel like we're busy, even though we're not actually like accomplishing very many things.
Yeah.
So anyway, people might assume it. If you get comments like that, I mean, I don't know. You might, if you get it a lot from the same person, there might be worth having a conversation. But I personally would rather err on people thinking I'm not busy or maybe not doing enough, but I have time for them, than like, good luck trying to talk to me. Because I'm like, at a church our size, I'm like, I don't know why people assume this.
Yeah.
This changes when you're established. So you have to, I think, at least in our experience, you have to fight this even more. But in the beginning, I think you need to be okay with letting people know that you have time for them, because you'll find that people will just assume that over time you don't have time for them, and then you can't pastor people or meet with people or care for people the way that you could if people think that you are too busy for them all the time and you don't tell them that you're not.
Yeah.
So,
and I also think like no matter how long you're doing this, there will always be pastor jokes that's all you do, like that you only work on Sundays, and be fine with it. Like obviously what you said that Christina's saying, like maybe don't make the jokes about yourself.
Maybe don't do that.
But like, I also feel like, I mean, obviously if people are saying this in a serious way, it might be something to address because they may have some other issue going on. But if someone just like makes a joke about it, or it's a joke, I think it's just be okay with, that's probably always going to be a joke that you're going to hear, and laugh about it and agree. Like, don't feel like you have to come back with like a defense every time someone makes a joke of like, no, I work a ton, and like who cares? And, people make fun of each other and people joke around, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Be a person.
I would say definitely, especially if you are a newer church plant, definitely probably don't make the joke like I do.
Yeah, no, that's a different story.
You can probably get away with it a little bit more if you're more established and whatever. You've got a track record, blah blah. But in the beginning, going around saying that when people might assume it more often in the beginning too is probably not wise.
Yeah, probably not.
Those are 6 questions you will get when you are a new church. Hope that was helpful. Next week on the podcast, we're going to give you questions that you will get when you're an established church.
Yep.
Because they change a little bit.
They do.
So, again, we also said in this episode, if you're on Facebook, join the Practical Church Planting Facebook group. Online, practicalplanting.com. We've got tons of free resources. And we're also on YouTube, Practical Church Planting, which also might be easier to search for things. If you go to our YouTube channel and you type in any number of topics, it'll probably like pull them up a lot quicker. So productivity or whatever, email or whatever, if you go to our YouTube channel, it'll like pull them up easier and you can watch them.
We try and make our titles as simple as possible.
Yes.
So if we talk about it in the episode, it's probably in the title.
Yes.
Yep.
So there you go. Thanks for listening. We'll be with you next week on Practical Church Planting.